Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leading Indicator. I'm Kinsey Graham Baker, and I've got a big question today. Could AI video content change the advertising and entertainment industries forever? It's a question lots of people have been asking lately, especially following the latest project from our guest today. PJ Ace is an AI filmmaker whose most recent credit was an ad spot for the online prediction market Kalshi, made entirely with Google's Veo 3 video generator. So what does this advertisement mean for the future of creativity? How did it actually get made? And what comes next as AI makes further inroads in advertising and entertainment? We're covering all that and more today on Leading Indicator. PJ, welcome. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thanks for having me on, Kinsey. I'm really excited to share today.
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, it's been, I'm sure, a busy couple of days for you after this ad came out. And we're going to talk all about it and really, what it took to get there, what this means for the future and all of that. But before we get into the big picture, I want to make sure that we nail the details, the nitty gritty here. So you created this AI commercial for the prediction market, Kalshi. It aired during the NBA Finals. It's really gone viral. I've seen it on my own feeds. I've seen it all over the place. And I understand it cost 95% less than traditional ads to make. You also said it took 2 days to create. It was a 30-second commercial. Again, that cost was significantly lower than we would expect for a traditional ad spot. What does this shift in production mean for you as a filmmaker? I'm interested to know that in the big picture, but also what was the process like to develop this? What tools were in your toolkit and what kind of technology was indispensable for you to make this?
Lots of questions, but great questions. I mean, just kind of off the cuff, general thoughts is that it was a really, really incredible opportunity. I mean, I've been a commercial director for 15 years. So, I definitely think the filmmakers, the AI filmmakers right now, that are really thriving they're just filmmakers. We learn new tools. And, I had a lot of different niches. I was a YouTuber briefly grew a channel from 0 to 1 million subscribers in 6 months. And then I launched my own TV series. And then after spending, millions an episode, I just realized last summer when it launched, I was like, I need to figure out a way to make this cheaper because, this is kind of where it's all headed. And I don't want to have so much kind of power in the hands of 5 media companies that can greenlight your hopes and dreams or not. I think these tools really democratize the ability to not spend 15 years to make your own TV show or, have to have all this money as a brand in order to create some really compelling spot. And so I'm just always kind of a rock and roll, power to the people when it comes to tools. And I know a lot of this stuff is really scary, but I think when it comes to kind of the net good to anyone be able to tell any story they want to, I think that's going to be amazing for creators. I think it's going to be amazing for brands.
Yeah. And, that perception of this could be scary. I would love to hear a little bit just briefly about why you think that tends to be the gut reaction from a lot of people when they see something that's entirely AI generated. Why is that the perception and how would you kind of buck that perception?
Yeah, I think the kind of the AI pushback, if you will, comes from 2 primary angles. One of which is obviously it's the training data. Everyone always wants to know was this kind of ethically trained or was it just scraped? And then the second end is okay, well, how do we actually care about artists? Will they be entirely displaced? In the Hollywood sense, how do we care about the catering companies and the gaffers and the grips and all the kind of ancillary positions on set? So I think there are kind of 2 sides of that argument. Obviously I can't speak on behalf of what should be, if you will. I'm kind of more a practical realist of well, look, regardless of how I feel about the future of filmmaking or what it should be, I love, picking up my, whatever red camera, but I also know it's gathering dust because that's kind of not the future. And so I always just try and give people real tips for okay, how do you ride the tsunami that's about to hit, Hollywood and advertising? And right now it's let's learn the tools. Let's be curious about them. As far as the training data set goes, one of the things that's really incredible about Veo 3, which is Google's new kind of groundbreaking model that obviously in the last month is released, and it's caused a lot of my, probably 40 million views over the last few weeks just on my content. And certainly a lot more on some other TikTok accounts where Bigfoot Yeti vlogs has been there and Stormtrooper vlogs and just lots of Bible influencer things. Like it's been crazy to see like a explosion on anyone's social feeds now. It's like half AI content, it feels like. And I think it's sadly, positively, it represents the future of all media, which is that it's going to be generated. And the reason for it is that you can finally create anything you want. And there's some pros and there's some cons with that. But what I was saying about the training data side is that VO3 is actually, to my understanding, Google's explained it to where they offer indemnification on that. Their training data, they say, is they have the rights and the licenses to train on what's created and what's output on VO3. And so to that end, I think it's kind of probably going to be the end-all, kill-all to all the other models, because they certainly don't have Google's robust legal resources to kind of cover their butts. So good. I mean, to the other companies in the race, good luck. I wish you the best, but I don't know. It's really hard to imagine Google not kind of being the category winner of this. Maybe ByteDance, who owns TikTok, they've got some pretty good models too.
Yeah. It's been a good run for all the other contenders, right? It's it's interesting too that you bring up this idea that the pace of technological innovation is something that I think is really interesting for a lot of people who are following this intersection of artificial intelligence and technology and creativity, which is ultimately a lot of the conversation when it comes to advertising and entertainment. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about this specific tool itself. I understand it took about 300 to 400 generations to get 5 usable clips, 2 to 3 days of work. Is that something that will meaningfully impact the pace of all the rest of your work? I'm curious to hear a little bit about how this project fits into the broader context of, being a creative and trying to keep that pace and to leverage the right tech tools. How does all of that kind of play? How does all of that work together to make, whether it's another ad or, a TV show or a film? I would love to hear a little bit about how that impacts your pace as a creative.
Yeah, so I also have a 25-minute fully AI TV show about the story of Jonah. So that's like I'm very invested in the kind of like the Hollywood side of like where things are headed, but also on the ad side. I'm probably going to double down a lot more on ads than I am on the Hollywood, because I just see it honestly like there's better margins, faster cycle times, like more well-financed clients. It's just like at the end of the day, like ads, like the kind of ROI constraint of what they put in versus what they get out, it's just better than it is on Hollywood. Like Hollywood's a much more risky investment. It's like it's a sexy industry and we all love it as investors, but like from an actual pragmatic standpoint, I think there's a lot more kind of money for us as a studio that I run to focus on ads, just because again, like the cycle times are higher. I also think it plays to the constraints of like the models right now. Character consistency is something that AI still struggles with. And so doing our full 25-minute film with all these same characters, like it took a much larger team. Now, granted, it was still like 95% order of a cost of reduction in what, would have been otherwise like a, $30 million biblical epic. We did it for a fraction of the cost, fraction of the time. So still huge cost savings on the Hollywood side. But I just think, just like kind of ads is a bit better of a focus as a studio to have as our primary focus, again, because of the velocity of the attention that we're getting kind of as a company when like our stuff's constantly going viral. We're in the, constantly in the conversation. Whereas like when we'll launch a film or something like that, like it gets buzzy for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and then everyone forgets about you. So I just think as a creator right now, it's actually probably smarter to orient yourself around short form content, just because that's the consumption cycle and it's going to lead to a lot more work.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And knowing that, taking that into context, and pairing it with the fact that this ad took significantly less money to produce, which means that the company ordering the ad pays significantly less money to make it and to get it out into the world, right?
Yeah, we could double tap into like the process of like the cost breakdown at some level. So like one of the things I'm not sharing is like what my fee is kind of a AI studio is, just on the basis that like, one, it's still a huge cost reduction. It's like a win-win. I always explain it. Like we're making great rates that like, or me as a director specifically as well, like I'm making more than I did as a working commercial director, because what people don't understand is like, directors can have expensive day rates, but what that represents is like the weeks or even months leading up to a project bidding on it, and then also kind of the weeks and months in the edit afterwards. So they kind of like wrap all that in at some level into like a very expensive day rate. But like now I'm able to crank out a project every 2 to 3 days at some level and still charge like a meaningfully good day rate as a director. So I think like, yes, in some senses, like the costs go down by 10x in many regards, but also like the output goes up by 10x, and you're able to get really efficient. Like our teams now, because this is all text to video, like we have a writer and we have a director that kind of like puts the prompts together. Like we used to have like lip sync experts and Comfy UI experts and animation experts, and now like Google's kind of created the full stack of like sound and lip sync and dialogue into that. So I just think the teams get a lot smaller as time goes on. And then, like you said, I was like 14 shots, probably 20, 30, 40 generations kind of per shot, which was like 300, 400 shots. Right now, it's like I use the Google API. It was like $7 a generation because I used the wrong freaking program. So it costed me a lot of credits than it should have. But now Google just launched a 20 cents a generation model. So I try not to like BS people on like, no, the actual core costs of the credits are not that expensive, and they're coming down each day. I mean, a lot of like my colleagues are like, they're like, look, don't say how long it takes you, and don't say how many credits. And I think there's a lot of veracity to that. And like when it comes to sales calls, when you're talking with other agencies, but at the same time, I'm kind of just like look, like whether or not we like can hide the fact that they're like great margins or something like that for a few months, like everyone's going to shift soon. And I'd rather actually just help educate people. Like it does take sophisticated directors with taste to prompt these things. It's not like, okay, I just used ChatGPT for the script and then I said yes to the first thing that came out of the slot machine on generation side. It's actually like still it takes hundreds of iterations. You have to have a lot of taste to put it all together, and that's worth something. And then, but I think also it's like you go from like cost plus pricing as an agency, and you talk about value pricing. And so like when anyone can create anything, actually what grabs attention is the most valuable thing ever. And so really what you're coming to like a high tier agency like ours is you're coming for the taste and the attention, because you have to hook at the start, you have to engage them to the end, and then you have to get them to comment, to share, to like, to kind of double tap and enter in your product. And that's something that's not any like intern at your company can't do just because they have a ChatGPT subscription and a VO3. It takes a lot of expertise to just understand kind of like the pipeline of what makes an ad compelling and what makes it convert. And that's why I think there's actually value-based pricing. So I say that to give hope that like filmmakers can still charge good prices. And then on the flip side, like brands can get crazy back-end value when these things go viral, because you can build them to go viral.
Right. Yeah. And there are plenty of very smart people who would also argue that as it gets easier to make anything, taste continues to be a premium, right? You want to continue to pay what is necessary to have a tastemaker, to have somebody with good taste attached to a project. But with all of this in mind, I'm curious to hear your perspective on what happens next. What is your expected timeline for if/when fully AI generated commercials become more of the norm or become something that's more mainstream in advertising? This moment feels isolated in that it has gone viral. This feels like a big turning point, a big moment. The news cycle has really locked in on this project that you were part of. When do you think this is going to be something that's maybe just the norm?
6 months from now, like 12 months from now. Like I really don't see a world in which TV commercials aren't mostly generated by the end of next year. Like full stop. It just doesn't make sense. Like if we're already near photorealistic now, and the quality, we've seen the rate of like AI video quality on like an exponential J curve, and we've seen the costs come down at some level on that line as well, and we've seen the adoption on like on the filmmaker side, like pro studios getting in and pro filmmakers. Like because at the end of the day, I think a lot of times people have this like filmmaking is this sacred cow of like it has like there's something more pure on it. But like advertising is not pure. Advertising is inherently artificial, and that's okay. Like pharmaceutical commercials that have like testimonies from people, like those things are scripted to the teeth. I know it because I shot them, and it's fine. Like I don't see anything more authentic about an AI person saying something that was scripted, if it was shot live action.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I think it really draws into focus some of the bigger conversations that we tend to maybe have a little bit more when we're talking about the intersection of Hollywood and AI more than advertising and AI. But it hasn't been that long since the strike in Hollywood, since the union workers went on strike, I think a couple of years ago. And a lot of the conversation around that time was the impact of artificial intelligence on working actors, working producers, anybody in the industry. When we have these conversations about in 6 months this might be the norm in advertising, do you expect that to bleed into the more traditional Hollywood entertainment industry? What do you think the crossover is there, if any at all?
Yeah. Obviously, the two are linked, and ads are always going to be a kind of a leading indicator, no pun intended, to where Hollywood's headed. Just because, again, it's far easier to create a 30-second ad than a 30-second or 30-minute TV show, and then in Christopher Nolan's case, a 3-hour movie. Obviously, at the highest levels of Hollywood, I don't know if they'll adapt that quickly to AI, but I'm very privy to the behind the scenes of a number of major studios and production companies and productions that are using it heavily in the pre-production process. That's already almost everyone's using Midjourney for the pitches and all that kind of stuff. And then on the VFX side is something. So that's what I call this bookend approach, where Hollywood's right now is embracing on the front end and the back end. But obviously the actors are really sacred and the sets are really sacred. And sure, I guess for now. But eventually, I think you'll just split between these really high budget Christopher Nolan super blockbuster films, and they're not going to have a lot of AI. And then you're going to have all these kind of, which is what we have right now. There's no films in the middle anymore. It's just kind of low budget. But for the first time, these quote unquote low budget, $1 to $5 million films, they're going to be able to look like they're $40 to $50 to $100 million films. And I think that's net good. I also think you're going to have a small team of filmmakers that are able to kind of displace Hollywood. And then the bigger conversation we don't have time to get into today is I actually think it's going to completely change how content is consumed. I think we're going to switch to vertical daily and weekly narrative content for the first time ever. And then that'll maintain as the dominant thing from here to Kingdom Come is I subscribe to my TV shows for a daily 3 to 5 minute kind of episode, and we're going to be able to do that within a year to year and a half.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that in the broader context of the toes being dipped in the water. For the example that comes to mind that I saw recently was FX has this show Adults that has kind of gone viral with these creator sort of characters, and they're posting the entire first couple of episodes in 2 to 3 minute clips on TikTok. And that's not an isolated incident. That has happened across the board. It's kind of become a thing. Posting a movie in 5-minute increments is something that we see on our feeds a lot. What does that do to the entertainment industry? And we like you said, we don't have time to get too deep into how it impacts the entire space, but in 30 seconds or so, do you think that changes the necessity of creativity? Do you think that changes the inputs to a creative product that is the output? Tell me a little bit more about how you see these things sort of overlapping.
Yeah, I mean, creativity is going nowhere, and it's just all going to kind of get reformatted to the new capabilities. So, obviously content is going to 10x, is going to 100x. Our attention spans are going to even more go to zero in some ways, but people will just kind of adapt to the new normal, as we saw over social and UGC content over the last 10, 15 years. Is people are just going to get better at hooking you from the start, and more importantly, the staying power of brands. And I think there's going to be new universes that are going to be created that are going to just be small studios like us creating these crazy Star Wars-like universes, and brands can integrate their stories in it. And also, we're able to tell unique stories where we're selling merch, we're doing transmedia with games. There's going to be these billion-dollar IPs that are spawned out of insanely small studios, and they're going to do it on a weekly basis. This is my huge bull case thesis that I think no one's kind of listening to. And studios will adapt in the ways they will. But I'm not bullish on the big streamers as much as I am independent creators. I think those are the ones who win in the end.
Yeah, super interesting. And especially given what you mentioned before about that sort of, the middling out of the traditional Hollywood industry right now, where we've got the Christopher Nolans and the Marvels and all of these major franchises, and then the more indie circuit films. Do you think that these AI tools create more of that middle, or do you think that we kind of continue on that path for the time being of the one end of the spectrum and the opposite?
No. I think it's like the vanishing middle class in America.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
everything just gets more polarized and kind of like end of the spectrum. I'm just extremely bullish on creators, small studios, and I don't know what it looks like for kind of Hollywood and big studio productions over the next. Honestly, not to be the Grim Reaper here, but like I see, in some senses, like most productions drying up. Like I see Hollywood being somewhat of a ghost town for physical production. It already was that way. Tax incentives and everything has been drawing people away. I think there's going to be a very small kind of, caterers and gaffers and grips and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like most things are going to be digital. We just got to adapt to this new normal. And I don't want to sound like I'm anti-Hollywood. I just want to kind of help prepare people for what's coming.
Totally. Makes a ton of sense. And PJ, last question before I let you go. As somebody who has obviously utilized these AI tools a ton, what are you excited about? What is something that is, beyond the conversation we've had today? Is it a tool? Is it a creator? Is it a certain person? What has got you feeling excited right now about your industry?
Oh man, that's a great question. I really appreciate you asking it because I don't want to be so doom and gloom with this. I hate being like, the kind of AI doomer, and I'm not. I'm like very excited about. I always use this analogy. I think the next creator of like the next Star Wars is going to be some like 14-year-old kid with a $200 laptop in like Lagos, Nigeria.
Yeah.
It's like the kids are inherently great storytellers these days. And I think the next generation of like creator talent, like kids don't want to be astronauts anymore, sadly. They don't want to be firefighters. They want to be content creators. And now for the first time ever, they don't have to make like dumb skits in their yard like we did with handy cameras. They can make full on like AAA blockbuster, TV shows like with their friends, starring themselves. So I think it's going to be a very bright future if you're a creator.
Yeah. All right. Well, I like ending on that, like ending on optimism. PJ, thank you so much for stopping by and explaining all of this. It's been really interesting to hear your perspective, and I really appreciate you sharing it.
Thanks for having me on.